run YPN. So I really just want to welcome you all, and thanks Sonoma State for hosting us today. It's very exciting. We have not done an event here in a while, so we're very excited to be here. Sonoma State is also one of our sponsors, so we really do appreciate that. If anybody's interested, we do have some YPN events coming up. They're on the table. We have our bash that we do every month. It's kind of a networking event for our young professionals. It's at Two Tread Brewing Company right in downtown Santa Rosa. So that should be pretty exciting. All of this information is on the card in front of you. And we do these kind of lunch and learns throughout the year. So our next one is going to be at TIV Branding. So we're going to kind of have a branding, social media marketing. And that is on March 28th. And then in between those two events, we also are doing a volunteer day at Redwood Empire Food Bank on the 24th. So those are just some of our events coming up. There are flyers on the table too about our program. And I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Yay! Thanks, Erin. Welcome, everyone. We are really excited to be hosting this event today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christine Pinella. I'm the Graduate Admissions Manager for the MBA and Executive MBA programs, as well as those programs in the wine industry, hence the wine today. And the wine today was actually donated by an alum, Erin Inman, who's here. Thanks, Erin. Yes, that always deserves a round of applause. So just by show of hands, how many SSU alumni do we have in the room? Ooh. Wow. Yay! That's so exciting. Welcome back to campus for those of you who are alumni. For those of you who aren't alumni, let's talk about how you can enter the MBA program. And then in 17 months to 2 years, you will be an alumni. So we have a great guest speaker with us today. And before I introduce Tim, I want to remind everyone that immediately following the lunch, we'll be doing a tour. Jessica Posey from the Wine Business Institute has offered to give us a tour of the Wine Spectator Learning Center. So thanks, Jessica. If you're interested, we'll just walk over right after the lunch. So here with us today is Tim Wallace. I'm really pleased to introduce you to him. Tim is the former CEO of BENZIGER Family Wines, and he came to Sonoma State 2 years? Did you just celebrate 2 year anniversary?
We'll go after 2 years, yeah.
Great. And he's our first wine business executive in residence here. So please join me in welcoming Tim Wallace.
All right. So what I do like is Q&A. I have about 30 slides. When I first interviewed with the former Dean Silver at the Graduate School of Business here, he asked me to come speak to a class, and I sent him a PowerPoint presentation that I had. And he goes, I kind of like it, but you're not going to use that, are you? I said, well, that was kind of where I was going to go with this. He goes, these students think it's death by PowerPoint. Don't do it. So I got up and I spoke for what turned out to be about 90 minutes about what was then the recent sale of our winery in 2015. Now, I'm going to stay with the PowerPoint because I'm going to try to put some structure around my journey. Because in a couple of email correspondence with YPN, they said the personal journey of the individual is as interesting to our audience as anything else. It's not an ad. I no longer work at these companies. I'm here at the university now. But I do want to give you a little sense for how I got involved. And it does start when I was young enough to be YPN, let's put it that way, all right? All right, so here we go. Here's where I'm going to take you. I'm going to talk a little bit about envisioning, growing, and managing your business from my point of view. Formalizing and downsizing. Actually, I'll show you how we took our company and we made it smaller and more profitable. And then some gray hair thoughts about leadership that you can either take or not take. And again, all you have to do is raise your hand if anything I say is interesting or not interesting, but no tomatoes on the menu today. All right, here's me in a kind of a biosphere. I'm from back east. I'm one of 10 kids, the sixth child. Really, if you ever think about a number from 1 to 10, you never pick 6, right? Whose favorite number is 6? That's me. So I started out in a pre-wine industry working in New York City. I married my wife, Patsy Benziger, whose name might mean something to you. You can either be smart or lucky, and I was very lucky to get in the wine business. We're still married. We're going on our 35th year of marriage. I joined the winery in the Glen Ellen Winery in 1988 and essentially founded a marketing department. They knew how to make the wine and sell the wine, which of course is about as far as you have to go. And then they had some accounting help to make sure that they could count, the proceeds. But this notion of marketing and creating a market and understanding where you were taking your brand and pricing it and all those things that are now second nature to your generation was non-intuitive to the family. So I had a shot to get in there and make myself valuable. We sold the brand and it was just a brand in 1993. The brand meaning trademark, inventory, a couple of leases with growers, and a warehouse. And not the physical assets, not the winery, etc. We held on to that and rebirthed it as BENZIGER, and I'll talk about that. I was named the president of the newly found company after, what amounted to about 80% of our employees moved with the acquiring company. We can talk about what that looks like if anyone's ever been involved in an acquisition or a sale. Then I joined the university, as was pointed out, about 2 years ago, and I do have a small consulting practice, because when you don't really have a job, you're a consultant, right? All right, first up, envisioning and growing your business. You can't really see this, but this is literally a wall of Glen Ellen wine, probably in the order of 200 cases on the floor of the Marina Safeway in San Francisco. There was a time in the wine business, and it's not now, where you could actually occupy tremendous space on retail floors because the profit associated with wine outside of the meat department was about as good as it gets for retailers. It's still the case, but there's much more control over end aisles, and there's battle for the position, as we know, in consumer packaged goods. So the thinking about Glen Ellen was to make delicious drink now popular price, and at that time $3.99 to $5.99. In fact, in Safeway, where we sold on the order of 800,000 cases of wine through Safeway nationally, in 1992, it was 2 for $7. So you could buy a Chardonnay, a Cabernet, a Sauvignon Blanc, or a Merlot, mix and match, 2 for $7. And that just, we had compound growth 3 years in a row at 100%. It was stunning. I mean, the issue there was getting supply. So it was launched in 1981 and sold in 93. The family, BENZIGER family, which owned and operated and founded Glen Ellen, our mantra was a family winery going beyond the expected and having fun doing it. And indeed, we had a lot of fun doing it. We were a 30-something group of brothers and sisters and in-laws whose parents, their parents, passed away and pretty much let this thing happen in the arms of 30-somethings. Terrific YPO story. This is the winery in Glen Ellen from an aerial view. It sits up about 800 feet off the valley floor. It's about 100 acres, and it's a precious asset that still today is creating some very special wines. Here's Bruno BENZIGER, my father-in-law, who passed away the year after I joined the company, and Mike BENZIGER, his 27-year-old son, who convinced the father to sell out of his third generation business in the East, come out, buy that vineyard that we talked about, which had 3 acres of grapes and 7 acres of cannabis, which up until January, that would have been like, what? Well, now it's like, dude, you guys got out ahead. Well, we were way ahead of the curve. We know the previous owner, and no, we didn't make cannabis Sauvignon. But Kathy BENZIGER, the then high school sister-in-law of mine, very popular in Philadelphia High School. This is a dairy truck, a milk truck, which was brought in behind the winery in order to ferment the first wine, Sauvignon Blanc, because the plumbing and the refrigeration hadn't been firmly established by the time the grapes came in. So the family literally fermented the Sauvignon Blanc, which went on to win the sweepstakes award at the Sonoma County auction, or Sonoma County Fair, which put the family on the map, and the rest, as they say, is history. This is the deal. This is what we looked like. That is Glen Ellen Winery in 1992, the year before the sale. This is Nielsen, AC Nielsen scanned through national chain sales. Supermarket. Number 1 Chardonnay, number 4 Sauvignon Blanc, 3 White Zin, 2 Cab, and number 1 Merlot in the U.S. Again, this family owned and operated, 100% held by the BENZIGER family. That worked out to 4 million cases, and today that's still a very significant wine. I mean, there's only maybe 10 that today are that big. 7th largest in the U.S., 4th largest exporter, and we sold to Uline Company, which is a division of Diageo, which is now the wine group. Come full circle, it was the wine group that buys BENZIGER 25 years later. So this is the entrance to Glen Ellen and the notion that we sold the brand, and this is just to show you that, well, that's all we did, was just change the sign. It went from Glen Ellen to BENZIGER, same assets, same beautiful properties, same offices, 90% less employees, 10% the size, reboot, try to get this thing up and running. A terrific challenge to try to go from being a dominant player with tremendous leverage in the market to a very small player that they didn't want to hear from us in the trade.
Why sell such a large brand? Was that to pivot and have a capital injection, or what was kind of the reasoning behind it?
The capital injection. Morgan Stanley guy, you're right. What does that mean? No, just kidding. No, this was simple. It's a great question, and I didn't tell you the story, but Mike BENZIGER, the young guy without the shirt that I showed you in the early slide, he came to me after a national sales meeting that was actually here in Roanoke Park at the Red Lion, and he said, Tim, I've had enough. Now this is after he had just given a terrific, opening remarks keynote for our 350 employees that had come in from all over the country and in a couple of cases from around the world. And he said, I'm just whooped up, I'm beat, I have young kids, I'm not seeing my wife enough. This is not my original plan. My original plan was to have this small boutique winery, highly differentiated wines, have himself spending a lot of time in the vineyard, which is what he was doing when his father bought into the idea. The father came up with the idea of using bulk wine to create a branded product called Glen Ellen Winery, and it took off. The tail wagged the dog, and for the better part of a decade, Mike was working for a company that he didn't feel was his own. In fact, he was the largest shareholder. He was the president of our company at a young age. He was indeed the man, as they say, but he didn't feel like it was his company. So I had recently gone out of graduate school, and I had friends in investment banking, and I had them come in and talk to us about how we could kind of have our cake and eat it too, and that is to say, sell off the brand without leaving the property that Mike wanted to continue to farm. And the numbers were right, and all the family said, yes, let's do that, that works for us, and we downsized. But that's the reason. It was a very personal fatigue that became a very highly valued decision that we all made, and it all worked out for us. Any other questions thus far? Okay, so in 1994, which is the year after the sale of '93, the BENZIGER brand is launched. We grow to about 250,000 cases. About 200 of that is in the national distribution, and 35,000, which is where the money is. And for those of you that are not in the wine business, when you can sell direct to the consumer and take out the middleman, the distributor and the retailer, obviously your profit's there, right? Because you sell at the same price. And the reason you're able to sell at the same price is because the consumer is used to it at that price, because that's where they can get it in their home markets. And so when they come to the winery, they're used to paying that price. And they're like, wait a second, you don't have a markup on this. Why aren't I getting a discount? And then the other thing we say is, well, we don't want to compete with our retailers. We don't want to compete with our community of distributors. So there's a you go from, these numbers may not make sense, but 35% margin to maybe 70% margin. So twice as profitable per unit in terms of margin basis, much more than that in terms of dollars. 15,000 wine club members, 100,000 visitors to it. That is still a standout number. Outside of Mondavi and maybe a few other properties in Napa, nobody touched that in terms of consumer interest of coming to the winery. So our strategy was to be recognized as a good value in the $10 to $25 price point, which still is a very sweet spot of the industry. And we had the oh shit moment. What was happening was we came into this, what would be described as super premium category from a popular price, the $5 price, to the 10 to 25, with this notion that we'd build them high, wash them fly, and promote heavily, and discount, and all of the things that were helping us when we were a very large player. But since we were a small player, we were just throwing away our margin, and we found ourselves in a negative cash flow position. We'd gotten too far over our skis, if that's current in the Olympic timeline here. And our core belief was that we needed to be Sonoma in our appellation. We needed to be, we thought, in order to compete in a differentiated space, tied to a nice appellation called Sonoma. We didn't want to go to a California appellation, because then we would truly walk into the very large space of Gallo and Sutter Home and Mondavi and Beringer and the like. Well, so what do? We realized that chasing the cases was increasingly unprofitable. So this is the part about we downsize. We say, well, you know what? We're not going to forsake the quality of our product. We're not going to forsake the appellation. We can't afford to do it at this price. we're going to take our prices up, which in any kind of consumer packaged good usually means less volume, because once you raise your price with the consumer, they start to look elsewhere potentially, unless you have a differentiated point of view that's worth it. So what did we decide to do? We go all in on biodynamic, sustainable, organic farming, which this is back in '06. It seems very kind of trendy today, but we were the guys with the arrows in our back. This was a very expensive way to farm, and a very vulnerable way to farm, because you can't use pesticides, fungicides, and emergents to keep. The reason those chemicals exist and they're so popular is because they work. And so when you pull all that off and you make yourself vulnerable in your farming practices, you make your entire company vulnerable. Well, we doubled down. So our notion was we revolutionized the total wine experience by producing artisan wines using the most advanced natural winemaking practices, regenerating the environment, and creating meaningful experiences, connecting a growing group of enlightened customers back to the land. When I say enlightened customers, some of you are millennial, I mean this is who we were talking to. You guys grew up, some of you, with your parents starting to get to my age, feeling like, hey, you know, I gotta eat better and drink better, as it turns out. And that's what we captured, was that trend. This is how we see, you know, this is how we would talk about it. Industrial farming, big tractors moving across, very kind of distant from the farmer. Conventional was using all kinds of chemicals. Sustainable is really the buzz today. Well, it doesn't really have any teeth. What's sustainable? We actually did get a sustainability standard created for ourselves, but the real action is organic and then ultimately biodynamic. I'll take you on a little walk through what we did there. So at the winery, you can still see it today. We have what was called an insectary, and this is essentially beneficial. These are plants that attract beneficial bugs that then go out and naturally migrate into the vineyard and prey on the bad bugs. So we grow a colony of good insects that beat up the bad guys. Created this what we call bug highways. In order for these insects to get further along so they could get out to the bad guys out there, we had to like set up these little ramps, right? And you can go see this today. We actually have, and I don't have a picture of it, we have a tram. It's essentially a tractor that pulls a sled of about 25 people through the vineyard 10 times a day, takes you into this beautiful vineyard, and a very high vineyard, as I mentioned earlier, where you can see tremendous vistas and get a real education about sense of place. Our water ponds, what do we say here? We conserve roughly 3.5 million gallons of wastewater a year. We won a National Resource Defense Council award for that. Mike Benziger went to Washington and was feted in DC for being a leader in water conservation, which of course, as Californians, you all know how important that is. And here's just, you know, oh, look at those guys. I mean, we actually have these Scottish Highlander cows. And well, I used to have a sheep one, but I kind of cut it short because I wanted to get Q&A. And then we have our compost. This we wouldn't show the consumers. It's kind of, what is that? Well, that's all of the organic waste, other than, you know, human, of course, all the organic waste that we would then use that creates a fertilizer base that goes back into the vineyard, which is part of the closed system way of farming. And all of this kind of like, well, I'm with a young professional group, well, so what? This is kind of cool, but are you guys, you know, zoologists, or are you guys running a business? Well, we get ourselves on the cover of the Wine Spectator. You're going to go see the Wine Spectator Learning Center, and I'll tell you, you got to go check it out. That's going to be the center of gravity and arguably one of the heightened intersection of American wine scene and arguably international wine scene. It's a terrific building. The university is so enlightened to be able to put it together, and you guys that get a chance to see it is a special invitation because it's not open yet. I don't think the ribbon cutting until May sometime, right?
29th.
May 29th, to be exact, Jessica. Okay, so this was all that notion of it got small to get more profitable, right? So here we are in 2006, as I mentioned, at about 250,000 cases, and we drop it down. We basically cut our volume in half. And you don't really run businesses by running them into the ground, right? I mean, this sloping curve is kind of counterintuitive, right? But the payoff is this. We doubled, and in fact almost tripled on a per case basis, actual profit per case. And that was more that did more than offset the volume, because we also had, we could shrink our infrastructure. We had a few less employees, we had a few less assets that we had to acquire in terms of barrels, we had a smaller footprint in general, and we became much more profitable. And so this is what we call it internally, margin after selling expenses. We increased the wine quality through our farming practices. We raised our prices, as I told you. That drove down the volume. And we, in fact, tripled down on selling more and more to the consumer, because now we had what I call a meaningful and distinctive product that you could not find anywhere. We were so sense of place, so tied to our practices on our real estate in that zip code that nobody could, quote, compete with us. Once the consumer was willing to give us their ear, we could tell them a story that would blow them away. And you saw in a retrospective sense of how did I get there, and indeed, what do I think about it? So from a leadership standpoint, this is just a little summary for me. The passion and perseverance, upper left here, under commitment, from Mike Benziger and his family to get behind that is unquestioned, unassailable. Risk takers, yeah. Told you the father sold out of his business back east, took a haircut of about 20%, selling to his brother who did not want him to leave the company. But the father said, I want to go be with my son, and then eventually the entire family. Resourcefulness, well, they were, Bruno, the father, he came up with this idea of this bulk wine, popularizing it at a price, labeling it. And in fact, it was Chardonnay and Cabernet and Merlot and Sauvignon Blanc, as I told you. Now, Bob Mondavi, who I had the chance of meeting early on in the 80s, he was resentful of my father-in-law because he put on Glen Ellen, that 2 for $7 Glen Ellen, Proprietor's Reserve. Now, arguably, he took some license. It was totally legal. And reserve has no definition in the U.S., and I'm not proud of that. But it was something that the government said, yeah, you can call it reserve. Well, so the consumer that was just coming into varietally designated wine, Proprietor's Reserve, that sounds like the good stuff. Let's do that. Well, they did that by the millions of cases, right? It was a stunning, resourceful way. Courage, self-bleeding, hard work. I mean, that whole notion of getting into the farming, like as I just told you about, there was no textbook. There was no backdrop. There was no background that you could go to that said, well, will this work? No, we didn't know if it was going to work, but Mike, our fearless leader, convinced us that it was worth going all in. Humble. If you met Mike, you'd think, and some of you may have already met Mike, and he's interesting now, he's doing biodynamic cannabis. He's the first Demeter certified biodynamic cannabis farmer on his own property, right above the vineyard on 4 acres. He's tying into Bill Silver. Some of you may know Bill as the former dean. He's off and running again. He's never had enough, and he's not somebody, if you met him, you'd think, that guy? That's the John Wayne of the 80s wine business? No way. Very humble guy. Open-minded, adaptable, flexible. That's a hallmark of the family. But then at the end of the day, you need to understand your market and your product, right? We took a lot of time to work on that. We hired professionals. We surrounded ourselves with fantastic professionals. We knew how to manage cash flow after we got burned by running out of cash when we were post Glen Ellen. We had plans, we had strategic plans and operating plans and human resource plans, et cetera, but not too much. You remember, it was going beyond the expected, but having fun doing it. We had some fun. And then we were pretty good about getting the word out about who we were and what we were doing, and we were always ready to tell the story. So I think this is, from my desk, obviously, this is a pretty good little setup for what might help you in your own journey to be leaders. And here's what I call the management toolbox. This is the stuff of MBAs. This is why you guys should be going to Sonoma State. This is what they teach you. They're going to teach you how to hire smart. They're going to teach you how to clarify your company and department or team goals. They're going to teach you to individualize responsibility, encourage employee input, delegate whenever possible, set the proper example, be liberal with praise, but criticize with tact, tell the truth, audit mistakes, and be consistent. Easy deal, right? It'll take you 14 months and it'll be worth it, man. You'll walk out of there a champ. Am I right, John?
You bet.
All right. So I'll leave you with this. Second to last slide, I think. This is how disciplined we got. You know how you go to meetings, and not this meeting, I hope, but you go to meetings in your own company, and you're like, well, why are we here? And what am I supposed to do? And what's going to be the result? Well, we wouldn't have a meeting. Of course we did, but we said we weren't going to have a meeting unless we lived up to this. Why are we discussing this? In other words, nobody comes to the meeting unless they know why they're there. It's not like, well, if my boss said I should go to, no, you know why you're here. What would be an ideal outcome? This is from the chair's position, right from the start, saying, okay, guys, we have an hour, we're going to figure this out. What do we hope to get? Well, I hope that we could buy the thing, sell the thing, make it blue, launch it, whatever your deal is. What's the process? In other words, are we going to have interaction with each other? Are we going to listen to a presentation? How's it going to work? And I've implored you to do the Q&A with me very shortly. And do you need to know something before you come to the meeting? In other words, are there some notes? Is there something you should read? Is there a document? Because you don't want people coming into the room going, oh, I didn't get that. And then you spend the first 10, 15 minutes of an hour meeting where people are just catching up. That's a waste of time. It's a waste of assets. It's a waste of company assets. So here we go, we'll close out with, it's behavior that counts, not words, right? You gotta demonstrate, you gotta walk the walk, as they say. And I love this, one of the great Americans, John Adams, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you're a leader. I mean, it's not about the leader. It's about what is being created through the leadership. I leave you with that. And now it's time for Q&A. We got 15 minutes to get over to the Learning Center, or 10 minutes here, and then walk 5?
We can leave here at 1:30 or whatever, so
All right.
we have plenty of time.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that might scare a few people. Hi.
Hi, I'm still thinking about the Scottish cows.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why that breed you brought over and it wasn't the more local route? I'm just kind of off topic, but
It
curious.
has to be the first question.
Sorry.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I do know this.
Thank
It's at least 50% how gorgeous they are.
Yeah.
Do you know it, Jen? No.
I was gonna say.
What did we tell people?
Let's just say they create more organic
Waste.
compost for the compost pile.
Okay, I like that. They are big guys. Big guys need a lot of land that's a good one. And they're gorgeous to look at, right? Yeah. And then there's, biodynamic also has horn, there's stuff about horns in there, but I don't want to go too deep into it. I think it's a mix of aesthetic as much as
I appreciate
contribution.
that.
But the contribution, I never really thought about that. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of stories about how when companies switch to sustainable practices, they actually find that they save a lot of money. So I was wondering how your switch to sustainability actually affected your profits.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So I can't say that during the transition, surely not within the first 3 years or so, because it takes 3 years to get Demeter certified to actually go through the withdrawal of the chemicals and the adulterations that you might be using in your farming practices. So certainly not then. And then there's this, investment in learning curve, just figuring it out and getting the right mixture of natural additives back into the soil, and then working with the plants. Now these are, vinifera grapes, and they're responding differently to certain soil types and certain things. So I would say that in the first 5 years, it cost us more. But then eventually, we got in it like any other learning curve in a business. You get some economies of scale, you get some efficiencies, you get some innate competence that comes along with your learning curve. You start to do things more shrewdly and cleverly and less expensively, and then we started seeing profits again. But I don't think in general going sustainable in and of itself is going to help you get more profitable. Hopefully it's going to do what's the most important, is that make a difference in your product to your consumer. That gives you a sustainable end game relationship where they understand what you're doing is purposeful and meaningful and caring, and they want that product in their life. Given all other things are pretty much competitive, and you can't overprice it to the market or underprice it. You shouldn't underprice it, but so yeah, it's not. You don't do it to save money. You probably do it to make more money and be better in the world. Who else?
I have a question. So, in today's landscape with a lot of other wine companies trying to mimic what BENZIGER has done, or in a way move towards sustainability, which in Sonoma County in general is the new thing, how do you keep the biodynamic portion of it as the golden egg while all of these other competitors are kind of muddying the waters of what it is?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, a couple of things. You called it the golden egg. I'm going to use your words. So, to be biodynamic is a tremendous investment of time and energy, and creates a great sense of vulnerability. And you're not going to find a lot of people that want to do it. And you have to be certified every single year. So you have to let the inspectors back into the property, go through all of your invoices to see, they don't want to find you buying chemicals and wonder where that stuff went. And stuff. I mean, you have to have this full audit, which is not cheap, and the process of doing it is capital intensive and labor intensive. But how do we, your question is more the muddying of the water from the perception of the consumer, right? Okay. So I'll answer the question that you didn't ask, and that is less than 5% of our production was biodynamic. So we didn't bet the whole business on biodynamics, but we absolutely created the highest profit center for us on that estate where we were teaching people about our sustainability commitment. So how do you stop them? Well, hell, Spectator helped us, but that was back in the 20 years ago when we got that article. Or more like 10, 15, I should say. But it was a constant barrage through our wine club materials and our e-blast to our consumers, and obviously our wine ambassadors on the property and our tour and etc. And it was just this multi-pronged, multifaceted approach to educating them about how what we were doing was distinctive and different, and in some cases unique relative to our zip code. But it's a bitch. I mean, just like any positioning of any product, right? I mean, Nike, all day, every day, banging you, banging you, banging you. If they thought they just had the market cornered at some point, they certainly didn't give it up. And then here comes Under Armour, and here comes all those other competitors, Adidas, et cetera. And it's a day in and day out grind of a dialogue with your consumer, and hopefully understanding who is your consumer. You don't want to be too wide angle in terms of your approach. You want to understand who are you really doing this for, and how can you nurture their relationship with you. Yes?
So it was a family business, and you didn't really touch on the family dynamics of being in business. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know if you just washed over that, or there wasn't any, which...
That was the long form. I was given 40 minutes, and they're going to be hungry, and I got to get the spectators. And okay.
Well, how are you so successful, in so many transitions with having so many family members involved?
Yeah. Okay. So I had a slide in there that would have shown you 28 Benzigers living on or near the winery in Sonoma Mountain in Glen Ellyn. And several of the original, my older brothers-in-law, their families actually grew up on the property. So you talk about people who felt entitled to someday own and manage this business, I can tell you that. So we had that breadth, 27, 28, 29 of us. We had a very successful business that, of course, well, that's cool. Wow, I like the way Dad lives, so I want a piece of that. And Dad's always said I'm the best and I'm really good and all that, even though maybe not so much, who knows. But we created a family council, which is an organizational construct that essentially, the way we set it up is, for each of the families, there were 7 families. Each of the families would have one vote, would have one representative to the council that would meet once a month, and they would talk about things related from the family to business. It wasn't about the business, although sometimes someone from the business would come in and do a nice presentation on our website or a new product, et cetera, tasting. And we would talk about the needs of the family distinct from the business. We also have what we call a family constitution, which we ratified with one person, one vote through the 28 or so of us, where we actually created the governing principles of how you would, one of the key points was, well, how do you get to work at the company? Or, what would be the possibility of us doing something else as a venture with family capital, et cetera, et cetera. And so we took about 1.5 years to do this with an outside consultant, and we laid out the framework, our constitution, for how this family was going to move through time with this business. And you could either be a part of it or not. But these were principles that were outlined and ratified by the whole family. So you had the family council, you had the family constitution. We had this thing called the Declaration of Interdependence. From Generation 2, remember Generation 1 passed on pretty early. So Generation 2, in our 30-something crowd, really was the founding group of, and certainly the managing team. What did we feel like we owed to the next generation or not? So these Benzigers got to know early on that while they may have spelled their name well at Benziger, part of what we call the Lucky Sperm Club, that didn't entitle them to anything more than an interview after 5 years of being out in the market. We insisted that they finish their education, whatever that was. It could be a vocational education or more likely an academic education, and they get to the end game of that. We gave them a year-long opportunity to work for us in all parts of the company. And then off they would go for 5 years, what we call flaming hoops. They'd have to go out, be hired, hopefully not fired, but maybe go through that, demoted, unappreciated, someplace where the name Benziger didn't have the cachet. They learn, they grow, they get self-confidence, they get disciplines, then they come back. Well, we had 3 of them before we sold that went through that program, and they're still there today. One has actually left because she's become a young mother, and she's decided that she doesn't want to work right now. But we organized it, we structured, we were systematic, we were objective, we were rational. And of course, you know what hit the fan on a regular basis. I mean, you want to get in some of those family council meetings and you have this sense of, well, why isn't my kid doing it? And somebody had to be the adult in the room and go, whoa, whoa, back to the Constitution. Whoa, well, this is not what we're saying. You know, and so we had to have our own issues. Our own laundry got a little dirty too. But at the end of the day, let me tell you one other thing. We only voted as an ownership group twice in the 30 years that I was there. And that was twice we sold the assets of the company. That was it. We just would wear each other down with the rationale of our argument. So those meetings got a little longer than that little prescription that I gave you, honestly. A great question, Jessica. But we did it in a very thoughtful, intellectual way that tried to be as unemotional as possible. And yet, when you have all family members at the table, it's going to be emotional. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When you guys most recently sold, and you mentioned that you guys have maintained the assets, but 90% of the employees have gone away, what does that look like in terms of changing the culture at the winery?
Okay, yeah, so that happened in '93. Okay, so we sold 90% of the operating assets of the company. And when I say operating, the revenue stream, the brand, trademark, etc. But and then we got to 10% of our size. Well, the entire family stayed, which was the cultural nucleus of the identity of the family. The brand was then became named for the family. This was the founding family that created Glen Ellen. So in that case, it wasn't as difficult as it might be in some other cases, where people sell their name and some of their namesakes go off with the acquisition, which I know has happened. But the core founders stayed. And as I said, the tail that wagged the dog in terms of the size and scope of our business was sold off. And we went back to Mike's original dream of creating highly differentiated product that then became BENZIGER, and very fortunate. So yeah, we held on to the original guys, and that's what kept the culture right there. Yeah.
And creating such a strong brand too is how do you, as it seemed like the wine group kind of came full circle and closed the loop on that, and choosing a buyer that's going to be a steward of such a greatly created brand, was that a tough decision? Did you have to, kind of find different people that you think would fit that, and continue on the legacy? I mean, that everyone knows in this room. What was that kind of like?
Yeah, well, so I was just up in Oregon 2 weeks ago speaking to a group of young professionals that were they're all Oregon leaders of small Oregon wineries and second generation in almost every case. And one person just asked your same question this way, but they're all in the business, right? They go, freaking wine group. Why did you sell to those guys? The wine group has, cupcake and bag in the box, and this became the crown jewel in their portfolio, right? They were they came very late to high-end wine, and they saw these assets and they knew they were available, and so and also I'm looking at the Morgan Stanley guy. Yeah, they paid them, so that did have something to do with it too. But all of our employees, here's the deal. This is curious. They said, here's the deal. We know you're very close to your employees. We just want to let you know going in, unless there's something we don't know, they're all going to stay, as far as we're concerned, because we don't have that talent pool. We're mostly in Lodi, Central Valley area. You guys are up there in the North Country. As far as we're concerned, you don't have a overly populated group. Most of the family members pulled away. We're going to not only keep them, we're going to give them a raise. And some of your key guys, you tell us who they are, we're going to give them performance contracts, and we're going to put one guy on the property from our company over the first year, and there will be no changes to anything else. We're just going to have somebody there that can be a liaison between the parent and the acquisition. And they held to it. And there's still just one guy. And he's a great guy, a young guy in his 30s, out of sales, who had never managed an asset like that. So he had to rely on the operating team that we had created of winemakers and manufacturers and CFO, et cetera, and that's his counsel, and that's how they roll. They've been true to their word. So I would, if anybody, obviously I've asked, if anybody was in the industry and says, what are they like as a group to negotiate with and deliver on what they said, 100%, take it to the bank. And they're a big company with a lot of debt. And now the BENZIGER brand is soaring in the market, growing at a rate that we could never have afforded to do ourselves. There was one back here. Is it? Anybody else?
I was just going to say, the previous slide, if we could possibly see that.
Yeah.
So
See.
just a sec.
You think that's easy? Let me try. There you go.
I think that's really valuable information for any of us that are in meetings.
Yeah.
Picture of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I mean, even to this day, if somebody says, hey, would you like to have coffee, do you want to do whatever? I'll just say, of course, certainly if it's a business development process, formal policies associated with how you can adopt the term sustainable with your product and with your company. And then there's a lot of other, like I mentioned, Demeter, that's the biodynamic certifier, they're out of Portland, Oregon. They have a much higher level of scrutiny. But no, it's you could Google it, or you could go to the Wine Institute if you're genuinely interested, or you could go to Lodi Rules, and you'll find that there's, I think, fish friendly. There's other forms as well. I mean, John, you're an expert at this. There's many certifying agencies out there. I don't think there's a lack of information. I think there's a lack of coordination and cohesion, which has created the chaos, which was brought up earlier with the consumer. Like, well, what does that actually mean? And in fact, there's some people who are farming biodynamically who don't even talk about it. They just think it's a better way to make a more distinctive product, but they don't want to be pigeonholed into a marketplace that says, oh, well, do you have the regular stuff? This bio thing, I don't know. I just want a Pinot Noir, So they don't want to have any hurdles for brand acceptance.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So kind of like a personal question is, from growing an extremely successful brand to being an extremely successful person, you think at the end would be kind of retirement, but now kind of coming back into education.
There's a wealth manager. What's my card?
Well, it's kind of the personal purpose with that, and also too is, the SDC, that's going up for sale too. Has anyone thought about turning that
Sonoma
into
Development
something?
Center.
Right. Or eventually it's going to go away. I shouldn't say it's up for sale, but is there any ideas of what that's going to turn into as far as a local hub, or as far as culinary or wine business?
Well, that's state. I mean, first of all, the retirement thing. You think this is easy to stand in front of you guys? No, I'm fortunate, as you know, to join John and his faculty with being able to speak in front of people like yourself, young people in the executive MBA program, and importantly, oh my God, Staten's in the room and I can do this. Oh my God, am I glad I got to this? There it is. Oh my God, good answer. All right, so this is what I'm doing. Whew, my boss just walked in the room. All right, so we already talked about going to the Wine Spectator Learning Center. We already talked about the EMBA, Executive MBA. Whew, hey God. So, all right, here they are. Here's the universe of education, of graduate education here at Sonoma State in business. Are you guys familiar with this at all, these offerings? The one that I'm working closely on now is this one and this one, the wine space. But there's non-wine MBAs. Obviously, not everybody has to be in wine. We can cover your bet if you just want to be a talented master of business. And so these are the 5 programs. And they're John, what are they, 14 months roughly?
The executive, the one that you're doing, the hybrid one is
16 months.
The other is 17 months. And the professional MBA programs are 20 months.
And so look, these are tailored to the working professional. When I went to graduate school in business, I had to leave my company, take my wife, sell my house, move to another city, get invested in another city, be unemployed for essentially 2 years, although I did come to Glen Ellen at the time, and that's what, the rest of the story is there. It was a much bigger sacrifice. I don't think I would recommend, I have children who are 30, 28, 26, none of them have an MBA at this point. I would not recommend they do it that way. It's absurd, right? I mean, you guys can learn so much through online situation or through intensive Fridays, Saturdays, etc. And you do a lot of the learning. This is what Bill Silver, as I joked about it early on, it's like, this presentation I could send to you, and I can now, with audio thread, have my lecture associated with each slide. You don't have to stand here and watch me. I mean, I got a few tricks, but I'm not going to do them, right? I mean, other than that, you really don't need to be with me. And if you even want to ask me a question, obviously, we know that technology today is interactive. And we can do it around the world, sometimes in real time, or mostly asynchronous if you're going to be in different time zones, etc. So this is a tremendous suite of business mastery that's at your fingertips, that's right here, close by. And you will meet the professors in residential programs regardless. But you don't have to be as intensive on site as you did in my generation. And I'll tell you, these are some great programs. And I know you're going to get a chance to walk to the Spectator Learning Center, and as I said, and I'll close with this, this is the most exciting crossroads in the American wine scene, and we're hoping in the global wine scene. It's where it's at, and it's on a beautiful campus, right smack in the middle of wine country, with opportunities for experts from our industry, and it's of course the wine business I'm talking about, to come and talk and engage and converse with young people and old people about the American wine scene and honestly the global wine scene, because it's a very global product right now, very global industry. So thank you all. I see I'm going to get this up, right?